Hello, and welcome to test one of the sentence completion tests for the program. I'm going to show you how we do this, and then we're just going to do test one. I'll give you a little introduction, and then we'll just begin it. All right, now for each question, I'm going to go through it and explain why the correct answer is the correct answer, and why the incorrect answers are the incorrect answers. I won't explain every single word, but if there's a difficulty or a tricky part, I'm going to explain it. For most questions, I explain most of the words. Some of them are fairly self-evident, so I don't explain every single one, but most of them I do explain. Now I'll use the pen to mark things like if there's a signal word like an and, or in this case a comma, that lets us know what comes next, as in I'll read the question first. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren decided to draw attention to the way economic factors affect her own blank. And for signals like this comma, which indicate that the definition is coming up, I'll put a triangle, the people who elected her. And that is the target, which I will either circle or oftentimes I'll put it into a little box like that. And the people who elected someone are their constituents. And if the word has a number next to it, as this one does, then you can go to word families. And this is the number that this word is in. So for everyone, I will almost always try to explain the definition for a word that is in that has a number by it, because they're usually the difficult ones and they are in the word families. Or if it says chapter, like CH, and then a number like CH4, that means that's in the hamburger novel in chapter 4. And so from here on out, I'm going to assume that you understand what I'm doing. It's pretty straightforward, but that's your heads up. And so in this case, in number one, the correct answer is constituents. But so opponents wouldn't elect people, successors don't elect people, mentors teach people, and colleagues work with you. So the only possible answer would be constituents. Okay, so let's begin. Let's move on to number two. The office manager, once a blank administrator, was so changed by his pursuit of a promotion that his personality twisted into that of a blank and ruthless businessman. So ruthless is negative, so he's going to be negative here, and it's going to be twisted into ruthlessness. So it could be positive or negative because twisted means changed, so it's likely to be positive as a contrast. So once benevolent, he was twisted into vicious, and that would be correct, because benevolent means good and vicious means bad. So that's the correct answer. B, devious means tricky. So devious would work for the second blank, but heartless would also be negative for the first. So you can't twist from heartless into devious. So that doesn't work. Devoted and reluctant aren't contrasting. Devoted and reluctant have nothing to do with each other. So you can't become devoted and twist into reluctant, because reluctant and ruthless don't go together either. Prominent means well known, and secluded means away from society or living by oneself. However, secluded and ruthless don't go together at all. You can't be secluded and be ruthless. You can't be pursuing a promotion and be secluded, so that can't work. So D is wrong. And E, notorious is well known for in a negative way, and you can't twist from something bad into something good. So E is also out. All right, moving down to number 3. An eternally positive outlook quickly refreshed Susan's blank, but in contrast, Jerry, due to his not eternally positive tendencies, could do nothing but predict a chain of sorrow and loss. So this is definitely going to be negative tendencies, and this is going to be definitely positive. So humorous and adventurous is not negative, so that doesn't work. Bitterness and cheerful is the wrong direction. We need to have it positive and negative, not negative and positive. Confidence and resilience, those are both positive, so that's not right. Contentiousness is wanting to fight, and callous is unfeeling. That's not a contrast. However, in the E, we have what we need: positive of exuberance and negative of gloomy. Number 4, the architectural designs of the 20th century run from simple and minimalistic to Now we run, so it runs from A in the beginning and B in the end. So we need a contrast of simple, which would be complex or over the top, which is D, florid and lavish. Basic is not a contrast to simple. Efficient is not a contrast to simple. Severe is not a contrast to simple because severe just means extreme, which you can be extremely simple. And straightforward is a synonym with simple, or it means direct, so that doesn't work either. On to the next page, number 5. When pundits discuss the decline of fossil fuels, their assessments tend to focus on its blank. And here's our signal. Any forecast about the topic is filled or imbued with a sense of foreboding, which is a negative feeling. So, would the decline of fossil fuels be negative if they focus on its eccentricity, which is oddness? No, that doesn't make you afraid. Tedium is boring, and boredom doesn't make you afraid either. Foreboding is fear, so we need something that would be fearful. Decline would be inevitable. Now that would be fearful to run out of fossil fuels, and then mystery and excitement don't have the same problem as eccentricity and tedium. Number 6, Janet had always considered herself a blank and attempted to see both sides of any issue. And here's our target: see both sides of any issue, and regardless of her own preconceptions. So that sounds like a pragmatist to me. Radical is strongly favoring one side or favoring extreme action. A utopian is a person who is an idealist and wants to have the world be perfect. Partisan would also be the same as a radical, and a reactionary would be the opposite of a radical. A reactionary strongly opposes change. So a pragmatist is the only person who would not be biased in some way. Number 7, consumed in her focus on finding reason and order in the world, and these are pretty obviously some targets there. Meredith was so consumed in her focus in finding reason and order in the world that her friends worried about her connection to reality itself. So she wants to find reason, and that would be cerebral. That's thinking about thinking and being in one's head. Obdurate is stubborn, but has nothing to do with finding reason. Sensitive is possible, but sensitive doesn't have anything to do with reason. It's connected with emotion. Pretentious means arrogant, and we don't have arrogancy there. And enervated means weakened, and that doesn't make sense in context either. Number 8, given the proliferation or spread of media related to UFOs, Bigfoots, and government conspiracies in the 1990s, somebody had a brief golden age as they corrected common misconceptions. So the blank is people who correct common misconceptions. And that's the definition of a debunker, someone who proves that something is wrong. A nitpicker finds fault, so that wouldn't work. It's almost the same thing, but a nitpicker will find a small detail and say that that small detail is wrong, while a debunker will say that the whole thing is not true. Dissemblers are liars, and they wouldn't correct common misconceptions. Idealists don't make sense in that case, and well-wishers wish well, and so they wouldn't try to correct your misconception. Right, next page. Section 2, number 1. When an industry experiences growth, it is able to blank enough new employees to replace those that would be blanked due to technological innovation. So the relationship here is when it grows, it can create enough new employees to replace those that would be decreased. So it can increase enough to replace those that would be decreased. So produce those that would be required, that doesn't mean decrease. Invent to introduce, no. Replace those that would be removed. So create and eliminate is the correct answer. Create is more, eliminate is less. Repeal and reduce is both negative, and formulate and engender are both positive. So C is the correct answer. Number 2, when Jackie Robinson was blanked a major league player from the Negro League in 1947, his elevation, or raising up, represented a major milestone in the gradual erosion of blank practices in American society. So he was accepted for a major league. That doesn't make sense grammatically. Promoted to a major league makes sense. He was honored as a major league player, possibly. Denounced as a major league player. Well, if he's major league, then it wouldn't be uh, denouncing. Considered for, possibly. Um, Now, hierarchical practices, we're talking about race, so it's not going to be hierarchy, which is one thing over another. So he was promoted to, and it would be discriminatory. So they stopped being biased, so unbiased doesn't work. B is the correct answer there. Number 3, driven to neighboring countries by the necessities of war and starvation, many refugees are only begrudgingly blanked by their new homelands. So begrudgingly, the refugees are not wanted. So they're only begrudgingly accepted or adopted. Um, because begrudgingly means you don't want to do. And so the countries don't want them, so they begrudgingly adopt them. Some might say they're begrudgingly encountered, but that's not what a refugee, you don't encounter a refugee, you house a refugee, so encounter doesn't work. Number 4, because the general was overly blank when reports said he faced an army which outnumbered his by 2 to 1, his aides secretly questioned his sunny predictions of victory. So because he was overly sunny is our target for the blank there, and that would be optimistic. Belated means late. And overly imperceptive, you can't be overly imperceptive, you can only be imperceptive. Next page. Deciding on the theme for the dance was surprisingly not a blank matter. Colon. Now this is tricky because it looks like there's a contrast, but there's not a contrast. Books were thrown, blanks shouted, and tears shed. So it was not, if books were thrown and things were shouted and tears shed, then it's not going to be a peaceful matter. So we have peaceful, it was contentious, it was tense, it wasn't decorous, and it wasn't genteel, which means decorous or peaceful or polite. So what would you shout? You would never shout accommodations because that's getting along with people. And you would never shout anecdotes, which are stories, which leaves us with D, decorous and invective. Invective is hateful things to say. Section 3, number 1. The city decided to begin a yearly festival to blank the final dispersal of a blank of locusts that had been devouring crops. You could have a plague of locusts. You could have a pestilence of locusts. Not really. That's not usually how you would say that, but possibly you could. You couldn't have a prosperity, a fame of locusts, and possibly a turmoil of locusts, but usually it's a plague of locusts. The city decided to begin they wouldn't say nice things about a pestilence, and they wouldn't be sad about or lament about a plague of locusts, a turmoil of locusts. So B, commemorate or memorialize the dispersal. They wouldn't be sad about the dispersal, and there's no such thing as a pestilence of locusts. So B is the correct answer there. Number 2, sick with a stomach flu and suffering from a massive headache, Frank's brother was able to respond to inquiries with only blank grunts to the affirmative or negative. Pedantic means to teach, and colloquial means common everyday language. Flamboyant means too much, and since he's sick with the stomach flu and he can only do grunts, grunts is what monosyllabic is, one syllable. Encyclopedic is fully like an encyclopedia, having all the information. So only D would work in that context. Number 3, one must wonder how long the blank aspects of blank would last before our ecstasy. So the positive aspects of being so completely aware, which is the target for the second blank, would turn to negative things. So the delightful aspects of diligence, well, possibly. The exhilarating aspects of omniscience, well, omniscience is knowing everything, so that would work. Despondent, that's not positive, it means sad. And restful aspects, but restful is not ecstasy. Frenetic is passionate, but you couldn't have the frenetic aspects of despair, the excited aspects of sadness, so that doesn't work. So is it delightful aspects of diligence or exhilarating aspects of omniscience? Well, it's completely aware, which is the definition of omniscience, so diligence isn't strong enough. Number 4, while the rest of the medium explores new and varied methods of storytelling, the superhero comic book blanks the youthful or youthful at heart who still desire a bit of fantastic blank. So whatever the second blank is, it has to be able to be fantastic. Escapism is fantasy is not understanding necessarily. Questioning is not necessarily understanding. Intrigue is, it can be exciting, so that could be, I didn't mean to cross it out there, and there's no such thing as fantastic mediocrity, which is fantastic middleness or passive boringness. So is it A or D? Well, it wouldn't inhibit it. It would cater to the young or young at heart. So A is the correct answer. Pander is the same as caters to. Number 5, the trainer attempted to entice or lure the animal into compliance, but his every effort at enticing proved ineffectual. And the definition of entice would be cajole or tempt. Chicanery is trickery. Now, he's not trying to trick the animal. He's trying to tempt the animal, and that's cajole. Resistance doesn't work in that case. Impertinence is being rudely bold, similar to bravado. And finally, number 6, in order to maintain a disinterested or uninterested, or actually disinterested means not biased tone, a newspaper profile should be a not biased discussion of the successes and failures of its subject and avoid the antipodal or polarized mistakes of whatever is the opposite of polemic. So what would be the opposite of polemic? Vindication could be. Discernment is not the opposite of polemic. Discernment is figuring out what is right and what is wrong, which is what should be in the first blank. Censure is saying bad things about people or saying that they did something wrong. Animosity is fighting, and eulogy is saying nice words. So saying nice words is a better contrast to polemic than saying bad things and animosity, because those are angry things, and a polemic is also an angry thing. So that leaves us with A and E, but it should be, since we want to avoid antipodal mistakes, then it's not going to be polarized because those are synonyms, and that leaves us with E. It should be an equal discussion with avoid the antipodal mistakes of saying too much nice things and too many mean things. So that's the correct answer. All right, great. Go ahead and work on test number 2, and then listen to the video for test number 2. Thanks for listening, and good luck.